Hello everyone, welcome back. And today we're going to be doing our first animated movie review. That's right, we are going to be discussing about a movie which I mentioned in my community tab, I think once. At the time I started these movie reviews, I knew I wanted to discuss about this one specifically, as I saw it earlier this year, finally for the first time, and had a lot to discuss about it. In short, yes, it's very underrated. And I really love this movie a lot. So, for some backstory, this movie came out on 999, aka translation, September 9th, 2009, when I was about 10 years old. I wanted to go watch this movie when I was a little kid. I don't know why. I don't know if it was like I didn't want to or my parents didn't let me. I don't remember. But now, after watching this movie as an adult, I want to say this movie's amazing. I love this movie so much. This movie's really amazing. It has the producer of Tim Burton and the producer from Wanted attached to this project, but anyways, this movie was really good with this plot. Essentially, the plot is Nine wakes up in seemingly like a post World War One alternate World War II universe where the machines have taken over. It was very short. And then he meets number two. Number two is captured, and then he meets the others. One being a ultra religious figurehead, which I actually really like him a lot because of his character growth, and some of the stuff he says kind of reminds me of those sad, relatable video things, if you know what I'm talking about. Like the ones that are like feel depressing or whatever. Essentially, they go to rescue number two. 9 and 2 go to rescue number 2. Unfortunately, 2 dies. Eventually, they meet 3, 4, and 7. They eventually learn about the world a little bit more. And the scientist, who's voiced by, funny enough, a relative of the creator of the atom bomb, Oppenheimer. Eventually, some of the characters die, but then they eventually go on to defeat the main machine. Because the scientists wanted to make a machine that would help out life, but then the analog for a certain German ruler from a certain time period of German history takes the machine and forces it to create murder machines. And then the machine becomes smart enough and takes over the world and goes after all of humanity. And the reason why I say it looks like an alternative World War One, World War Two type of thing is because the symbolism and some of the ruins and some of the weaponry that we see in some of the flashbacks. The one thing I really like about the characters in 9 is how aspects of the scientists are infused into the characters. 9 is very curious, but he's the most optimistic, and he wants to change the world and make it better. 1 is the very, like I said, a very staunch religious like figure. Not that we see that the scientist necessarily talks about religion besides the alchemy, which he uses to inject parts of his soul, kind of like a Horcrux, into these dolls. But I really like how we get aspects of his character. The machine seemingly had sucked all the souls from all the other dolls it had killed up until this point. At the end of the movie, the souls are released into the air, and seemingly life begins anew, as revealed through the behind the scenes. Before we get into the review, do I think this movie should get a sequel? I'm very torn on this. On the one hand, I can definitely see where people are coming from a sequel angle, but the other hand, I'm like, what's there to tell? Life has started again. There isn't really much story to tell, at least in my opinion. But I also kind of think that this movie helped establish the steampunk, punk stitch aesthetic back in the early 2010s. Not so much recently, but back into 2010s. And horror music channels like Miyu, specifically, at least when he makes his thumbnails and his aesthetics for the various horror music he makes, kind of reminds me of 9. And I definitely think 9 has a large influence. So back onto the review. My biggest criticism of this movie is I wish that it was a little bit longer and we had more time to breathe. We do get some time to breathe between the various action set pieces, and we get the lore dump. What I'm meaning is more so chemistry between the characters, that we learn a bond between them. I don't know if people like necessarily ship 7 and 9. I think it's maybe a little bit weird considering that they're parts of the scientists, but kind of scenes like that where we get to know the characters a little bit more. And they're like, we definitely do get a lot of backstory for number 1. And in some ways, I actually think he was right, at least up to a certain point. I think his concern of let's preserve our own survival and make sure that we are okay, I think made a lot of sense to me. But he redeems himself and becomes a heroic character at the end, choosing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. And we see at the end of the movie, his frown turned upside down. Sorry for the bad pun. That's my only criticism. This movie was based on a short film, and I don't really know how close it is to the short film, but I would love to see the short film, see what it's like. Because I really liked the beginning part where it was completely no dialogue without sound, and I kind of wish we had more of those moments, those quiet, calmer moments, like with the first 10 minutes established in this movie, because it helps build the tension and it keeps your attention with the visual storytelling and the world building that this world is based on. That's my only critique of this movie. Otherwise, I really love the action set pieces, although in some areas the technology looks kind of dated in some areas, and a lot of the characters die. I wish some of the characters would survive, but I think given this movie, it makes a lot more sense for the characters to die, because essentially, like I said, the movie is not about preservation, it's about sacrifice, and this movie shows that a lot. Like getting over your fears, pushing past your limits, even those who have very staunch limits, which may seem reasonable at first, but on the other hand, just show that they have cowardice and that they are afraid to change. But this movie, I would say, it's definitely a cult classic, and it's definitely one of the movies I would definitely buy. I definitely do plan on buying someday, because this movie's amazing. This and Coraline. These are the movies I kind of wish I grew up with as a kid. Maybe in an alternate timeline, the way I tell stories would be different, but it never came to be, and this is the reality I live in. But anyways, if I were to rate this movie, I wouldn't rate it 9 out of 10, because that would be a bad pun. I would rate this a 10 out of 10. Besides my minor criticisms, I would definitely say that this movie is definitely a watch. I'm surprised it's PG-13. Personally, I would rate this movie PG. It's violent, but it's not like overly graphic or gruesome. It's just violence. This movie, like I said, I definitely feel is more like a PG rated movie, at least in my opinion. But that's a different conversation. But anyways, thank you very much. What would you rate this movie? Let me know down in the comments section down below. Until we meet again.
Free now. What happens next?
I'm not sure, exactly. But this world is ours now. It's what we make of it.